of them. It's mainly a lot of photos. Oh, sorry.
Sorry about that.
Mainly a lot of photos, just as to spark some conversation and some discussion. So I'll get going. I'll share my slides here. I'm just make sure that I'm okay. Can everybody see the main slide, not the one with the side notes? And that's is it just one slide that you're seeing?
Yes.
Okay, so let's get going. I'm going to try to make this, just like a conversation. Again, a lot of things that we've learned over the years. A lot of things that we're still learning. I mean, I was selected or asked by Julie to do this. That doesn't mean that New Glasgow is that much more ahead of anybody else. We're still learning all as staff members. I'll have some slides here of some mistakes that we do, but it's meant to see if we can learn. So, yeah, before joining, I will mention before joining New Glasgow, I was in the town of Trenton, so I'm pleased to see Mary Lou on today. So, yeah, so I'm going to talk about exterior elements, and this is not so much meant to be like a table of contents, or it's just some basic ideas of the things that we can talk about today. We might even do them in a different order, but I want to talk about sidewalks and pathways, trails, a lot about crosswalks, some about traffic signals. And I realize that every municipality on here today probably doesn't have traffic signals, but they're so important. Exterior ramps, street furniture, temporary sidewalks, and those are ones either that are constructed, to support an outdoor cafe or during construction. Parking is so important, and New Glasgow is just getting into the transit world. We have lots of improvements to do there. So you'll see some slides that aren't very flattering. Like everybody, New Glasgow has an accessibility plan. I had, I will say, a lot to do with putting this together. The lady on the front cover there that you see, Brittany Curry, she is on our committee and is certainly adds so much. I do have a slide later that she appears in. So we have our accessibility plan that we're working towards. I find that we're slow, but probably no different than a lot of municipalities. As Earl, as the accessibility lead, it's not a dedicated position. I kind of mentioned this on different times when I speak that, I'm the Director of Engineering Public Works, so this is still kind of on the side of my desk. New Glasgow is big enough that I kind of would like to see us work towards having a dedicated coordinator to really help push us ahead. But we've been doing some good work, and again, some of that will come up in the slide. Like everybody else's plan, we looked at, the different areas of focus. Today, we'll concentrate mainly on the built environment and certainly just the outside elements. I'm not going to get into, exterior stuff. I'm not going to read this slide, but it's just some snippets that were actually just copied from the accessibility plan. We've done it similar to others. We've identified barriers. A lot of these will come up in this talk today. We have a section on preventing barriers and a section on removing barriers. There's lots in here, but the intent again wasn't to read it. They'll come up later. We certainly, as I mentioned, still have a lot of barriers in New Glasgow. I look at near the middle of that, the accessible parking spaces. They're limited and they're not constructed properly. So yes, we might have some spaces that have the symbol painted on the pavement and a sign, but they don't meet the CSA B651. So we have to have a program and to replace these. All of this stuff has to be picked up by audits. Audit is where we're going to actually identify the barriers and determine a plan and a way to fund that plan. So I want to start really with, from my perspective, and budgets. Budgets are critical in removing and improving the level of accessibility. We have two, similar to everybody else, we have two main kind of streams. We have our operation and maintenance budgets, and we have our annual capital budgets. So within our operation and maintenance, there's many line items that actually go towards improving and removing, or improving accessibility and removing barriers. We need a common sense approach to asset management, and that includes accessibility. We do have an asset management plan, but I'll admit that's not something that I pick up on a daily basis to do my job. It's kind of, we get the check mark by having an asset management plan, but it's more the practices and the staff on how we do our business. So we need to embed accessibility into our day-to-day work. We do that for safety. Like every job that our crew does, safety is paramount. But we're not always thinking of accessibility, and accessibility crosses over so many different departments, whether it's recreation or public works. But we have to be looking at it. First of all, we have to be educated. That's the second point here. Education is key. We have to understand what meaningful accessibility is. I know there's still folks out there that think accessibility just has to do with a wheelchair user. And it's so, you know, the crew that are on here today, the participating are certainly well aware. I don't need to talk today about the different disabilities, but it's much more than a wheelchair. So we have to understand that, you know, accessibility is in everything we do has to, you know, involve accessibility. And to support that work, we need policies and bylaws. The town of Glasgow has a lot of bylaws and a lot of policies. They were written, most of them were written for some reason back in 1993. They don't even really reflect the way we do business today. So they need to be updated. And another big point is we must be able to maintain what we have. So if we build a new accessible playground, it has to be maintained. And maintenance also involves, you know, snow and ice control, winter maintenance. It's critical, and that will come. I'll have some slides on that. The other point I wanted to make, and this is probably the last of the wordy slides, is in our budget submissions, we have two kind of streams. We think of things that are programs, and they're based on best practices and items that are like required annually every year. And so a good example of that is like a sidewalk renewal program. Then we can look at budget or projects, and they're kind of where we do a replacement or a new item. So maybe the construction of a playground is a project, but both of them are directly linked to the budgets and directly linked to accessibility. So I wanted to talk about sidewalk construction. That is so important. So Public Works in the town of New Glasgow constructs our sidewalks. We're very lucky to have a dedicated and a very good crew that construct our own sidewalks. We rarely contract out sidewalk work. If it's a part of a larger project like a water main renewal and sidewalk work is included, then that will be done by a contractor. But in general, the town of New Glasgow installs their own sidewalks. The photo here, there is a contractor working there, but they're paving the a daycare there. They're not actually the crew, but this is just a picture of some sidewalk work we did probably 3 or 4 years ago. And you will notice we were using the tactile plates even a few years ago. Here's another example of a sidewalk. The little community there in the background on the right-hand side had actually really no access to the other sidewalks. This particular curve is a dangerous curve in the sense it's limited visibility, and it's an S-turn, and we have the tracks going through. So we work with the railway to improve the crossing. We installed a new sidewalk that will cross over and go up North Provo. Now you'll see the tactile plates in this picture. I don't like when they install the tactile plates with a space between them. So there's an example of where we continue to learn, and as staff get more and more used to installing the tactile plates, hopefully the better job we will do. I'll show some examples later that they're not as easy to install as they show on a diagram, or you'll see, you know, in B651, they're a little bit challenging sometimes to get them in. So we start with the sidewalk maintenance policy. Here's a policy, I believe, from 2011. I'm going to turn on a pointer just in case I need to show something. 2011, and what that policy states is the the engineer will develop an annual rating system for our sidewalks. So we do have a rating system for our sidewalks, but actually we do it every 2 years, so it's not quite as the policy says. So every year or every 2 years, we have an engineering student walk every inch of sidewalks in town. Again, that's only the sidewalks that exist, not, we also have to put sidewalks in where they don't exist. But so the student will walk, they look at things like cracking, raveling, dips, trip hazards, drainage, other. What I want to add to this list is curb cuts. So one might have a sidewalk that's in relatively good condition, doesn't warrant replacements, but if you come to the intersecting street and there's no ramp, well, that needs to be corrected. When we talk about sidewalks in our capital budget, every year, this would be, again, considered like a programmed item. This little slide is just directly copied from my submission to council last year. We were getting 200,000 every year to do sidewalks in our capital, plus we had about 80,000 in our O&M for operation and maintenance work. So we consistently were doing that. I will say last year that this line item didn't get funded. So last year we only did the work in the O&M and weren't lucky enough to be supported by council. So that's a challenge. Again, back to my statement on budgets. If we don't have the money as a department, it's pretty hard to make the improvements. The big thing is now the big increase in costs. So sidewalks now are about $400, maybe even $450 or $500 a meter. If you take our 200,000 and you divide it by 400, you're getting 500 meters of sidewalk. That is only about 4 blocks. So while 200,000 for our size municipality, which is a little under 10,000, sounds like a big pile of money, it's not getting that much new sidewalk work done. Winter maintenance. These are 2 pictures from the last storm. The picture on the left, it looks like the plow has gone by, but right where that ridge is where the sidewalk is. So if we can't maintain our sidewalks in a timely manner, then there's trouble for everybody, but especially folks that have accessibility needs. Now, it's not as easy as putting a machine on your sidewalks. We have a fleet of sidewalk machines, but if the machines are ahead of the plowing, then when the plow comes by, they just fill in the sidewalks. And so it sounds really easy just to run a machine down, but it's coordination. Going through this large amount of snow on this significant snowfall that we got was just overwhelming. Sidewalk machines are slow when they have a blower on compared to a blade. So it's just coordinating that work and having the resources, both staff and equipment to do the job. So sidewalks don't get cleared. I think it took New Glasgow, well over a week to clear our sidewalks. So winter maintenance can't be under emphasized. The fact that you have a brand new sidewalk and it's great in the summer months, but you have to be able to maintain that asset. This is the kind of equipment that we have. This is off the web. I just stole that picture, but it's a trackless. So the town of Glasgow has, I believe, 4 of this type and then two more of another type. The picture on the right is not in the jurisdiction of New Glasgow. It's actually in the county. It shows the lady there with the stroller is the lady I mentioned that is on our accessibility committee. She's been lobbying for sidewalks through this area with lots of it hasn't been easy. I believe that the community is now going to fund it. I know that even the accessibility directorate is probably aware of this issue, but she's worked tirelessly to improve the sidewalks through this busy area. But the point is here, showing it in winter maintenance that that's a struggle for anybody to get through, and there's not even that much snow on the ground, but without a level, firm surface, it's very difficult. So when we talk about winter maintenance, the town of Glasgow, we have a new, relatively new, because it's 2019, a snow and ice management policy. So what we did in 2019, we looked at our old policies and developed a new comprehensive policy, mainly to do with, clearing of streets. But there is a section in here, and if we were writing this policy today, I mentioned earlier that we keep learning. Like back in 2019, yes, the text in the yellow, it talks about accessibility should be a priority. The language probably would even be a little bit stronger now, knowing all the work that the province and the municipalities and everybody is doing. These policies should all be relooked at, and with even more accessibility in mind. But at least even in 2019, we talked about accessibility being a priority. Now, that is a very subjective statement. What does that mean? Does it mean that something should be cleared within several hours of a storm? It depends on the size of the storm. So there's a lot to go. A policy by itself is not the answer solely. We have a bylaw, and I just took a snippet from it. It was done in 2011, and it really needs to be looked at. This particular paragraph talks about our sidewalks in our downtown core, which is a certain zone. And in that zone, the property owner is fully responsible for the sidewalks. Now, the town of New Glasgow does still clear those sidewalks with the machines that I showed before, but it really is the abutter or the property owner responsible for maintaining that sidewalk. But again, 9 times out of 10, our machines are through before anybody is even clearing it. But that's the only area in the town of New Glasgow where the property owner is fully responsible for the sidewalk. Moving on to active transportation, the town of New Glasgow has an active transportation plan. I just stole that from one of the advertisements. But in that active transportation plan, there's quite a bit of language that is directly related to accessibility. So mainly about our trails and bikeways. And I'm not going to speak about signage and wayfinding today, but that is a big area that we all, I believe, struggle with to do proper wayfinding and signage. So for our trails, just like I mentioned before, budgets are critical. In the town of Glasgow, we kind of have 2 departments that are involved in trail maintenance, mainly Public Works. I will say, since there's nobody from our own department on here, Public Works probably does 95% of the maintenance. Recreation does do some, but we're mainly responsible for like washouts and tree maintenance and lighting and the general condition of our trails. We're very proud of our trails in New Glasgow. We have, I think it's on the next slide, we have about 7 kilometers of urban trails. The Sampson Trail is probably in a little bit better condition, mainly because, not condition might not be the word, but the other trails don't have lighting, where the Sampson Trail on the west side, very highly used trail. Folks come from out of town to come in and park and walk the trails. But again, just like every other asset, maintenance is key, and we have to respond to these maintenance issues in a timely manner. If there's washouts, you just can't leave that for a week. We really try to get on our trail maintenance as soon as we're made aware. We're getting better from a technology point of view. There's been some apps developed for staff, especially that are responsible for the maintenance, that they can enter into an iPad the issues, and then that will hopefully be linked back to a kind of a work order system. We have lots of work to do on that. I'm not suggesting that we have a great work order system, but it's mainly just making staff aware and then having somebody responsible to do that work. Inspections are key for that. We empty our garbage on our trails every day. So the staff that are doing that are able to report issues, whether it's a washout or vandalism, in a timely manner. Tree maintenance and daylighting is important for users of a trail, not necessarily just directly related to accessibility, but in order to keep our trails and to promote active transportation and health, just like every other asset, if we have trails and they're not in a good condition, not only does it affect persons with disabilities, and probably to a bigger degree than it does all trail users. Signage and wayfinding, I don't think we're there yet. It gets difficult to make signage that is accessible to everybody. You might be able to answer or solve one disability, but it's a complicated issue, and we all probably have to learn a little bit more on signage and wayfinding. So there's a couple of pictures of our Samson Trail. It is an urban trail. It isn't paved. This is mainly crusher dust. So it does answer the, a firm level surface, not as good as an asphalt paving. The picture over here on the right is a bridge that we did a couple of years ago. I'm going to guess like a replacement of a bridge. But now, as I'm looking at this picture, should there be a proper handrail along there? Probably. But that at the time, that's something that nobody would have even thought about. They would have constructed what we kind of refer to as a guard, more for protection, but not for a handrail. Now it's a wide a bridge, so I'm not sure, but I think a handrail would be warranted there. Another photo of our trail showing after, I guess maybe after a snowstorm or at least some snow. We do keep our trails open all winter. The current practice is, though, that trails get opened after our sidewalks are open, because we only have a certain amount of sidewalk machines and only a certain amount of staff. So trails are currently left to near the end, or at the end, once sidewalks are opened after a storm. In this last case, we had to use different equipment, loaders and backhoes, that kind of thing, to just open up the trails. So the traditional trackless machine that we would have run before couldn't get through. The picture over here, we just had a flood within the, I say flood, well, it was from the river last week, which the water came up and has, taken part of this trail out. So at this moment, that's closed. So work will have to be done to get that trail back in service. Back in 2010, we added on the George Street Bridge, which is, connects the east side to the west side. This walkway was constructed underneath. Now, the bridge itself, the structure, is owned by the Department of Public Works, which is the provincial Department of Highways. It's not owned by the town of New Glasgow. We own this new walkway, which was a great link. But with every project, there's always something that comes up. So in order to allow this to be constructed and not try to limit the load that was added to the bridge, because the bridge is basically at its capacity, the walking surface on that is open grading. So that is not ideal for a lot of people. It's not ideal for dogs. I've been thinking about trying to add maybe 1 or 2 foot, almost like a rubber mat or a conveyor belt or something, just for the pups to walk on, because I know my own dog and my daughter's dog, you almost have to pick the dog up because they're not going to walk on that. But persons with disabilities, that would be troublesome, but we can't replace that solely. And the other thing is, if we put something down, does it become a trip hazard? Is it something that will have to be removed in the winter? Would it be slippery? So we haven't figured this one out, but I would like to improve the walkability on that walkway. Okay, let's talk about crosswalks, because they're so important. So Just a photo. This is actually at that same site where I showed before, but here's a crosswalk. And I'm going to talk here in a minute about different types of crosswalks and how you go about determining how to properly construct a crosswalk. So everything we always hear about the TAC manual. These are two photos that I took just preparing this. These documents sit on my desk. They're almost the same, but there's a pedestrian crossing control manual that was done in 2018. These are still current. There's nothing newer have come out. And then there's the geometric design guide for Canadian roads. So these are guidelines put out by, they're not regulations, they're guidelines. So that's one thing you have to understand. So you can, it's dangerous to go outside the guideline if there was ever litigation or an accident or something, because what you would, in everybody's litigious now, what would be the reason that you felt it was okay to go outside the manual? So you'll hear a lot of engineers and public works department refer to the TAC manual, and we can't change crosswalk design or crosswalk requirements. It certainly comes up every time that there's a discussion about a rainbow crosswalk. You might hear that you're not allowed to do that because that's not in the TAC manual. So we have to be careful. So crosswalks, they talk about treatment selections. So for every pedestrian crossing, there's a treatment, and there's really three types of treatments, and they're listed here. So passive, and I'll describe what they are, active, and traffic signals. So a passive, that's the most basic, and really what a passive crosswalk is, it is pavement markings, mainly just two white parallel lines, and the side signs. That's what they call a ground-mounted basic crosswalk. So that's passive. Oops. There's under passive, there's still enhanced crosswalks. So that's ground-mounted signs, but they're a little better. So one example is the Seabrook crosswalk that you see here, or they may hang a sign above, but it's still a passive. So there's no interaction by the user, except for crossing. And this is called a mid-block crosswalk, and mid-block refers to, there's no vehicle controls here. The pedestrian's crossing in the middle of a street. Those are the ones that give, the designers the most stress in the fact that there's limited controls. So if we move from passive, there's two more types under active. So everybody now is starting to see these RRFBs, rectangular rapid flashing beacons. I will say that New Glasgow, we like to be ahead of the curve. We were probably, I know that we might have been the first municipality in the province, and that even includes HRM, that installed these. I saw these at a TAC conference, and there was a study done in Alberta, and so we started looking at them. This installation here wasn't the first one, but so we were proud to be one of the first in the province. I don't know, maybe HRM had one that I didn't know about, but so these are rapid flashing beacons. They're considered active treatments. They offer a higher level of protection. And what it involves is, pressing the pedestrian button, the lights come on and flash quickly, but it's still only a warning light. Vehicles still can go through the crosswalk. Well, they'd be against the Motor Vehicle Act if there's a person in the crosswalk, but it's a better level than the passive control, but it's not the highest level. So here's some pictures of RFBs. So they are controlled by pedestrian signals or pedestrian buttons. I will want to talk about these. We've gone to this version. So they're actually, you don't have to press the button. You can just wave in the button. So this is kind of the next generation. And I have a slide here where these actually can be controlled by your phone. When I was down taking pictures this week, I went to the other side, and you'll notice there's something missing. Somebody actually stole in the last little bit, stole the pedestrian button right off the pole. I wondered if it was hit by a sidewalk machine, but there's a harness that connects this device to the wiring, and you can see where it was unclipped. So believe it or not, somebody actually stole this for whatever reason. So we're always dealing with vandalism. So actually, so this crossing right now, it is basically at a service until we can get a pedestrian button put on. And they tell me that this assembly here is worth about $1,000. So for just foolish vandalism, you know, it's crazy. So this is the other side. So just a picture of RFBs. I know that most folks on here would know what they are. And I think you're seeing them a lot more in municipalities now. Again, this is a screenshot off my phone. I will say that something's not working right, so we're going to work hard to get these going. So these should be able to be, just as you roll up, say you're in a chair, you're a chair user, as you roll up towards the buttons, you could press the button on your phone. So when you look at this installation here, does this larger sonotube concrete base, you know, is that presenting a barrier itself? Should that be lower so that the wheelchair or the user, it doesn't have to be a wheelchair, can get closer to actually the buttons? And back to, I probably mentioned it, but back to winter maintenance. Nowadays, everybody's in a machine doing work. Nobody really, so our sidewalk machine will come along here, you know, on their route and continue going. Nobody's getting out with a shovel and shoveling around to get closer to the button. So we still see problems where, yes, the sidewalk is clear of snow, but now there's a big ridge and you got to climb over that to get to the button. So that's it. Back to education. Our crew have to do better, have to understand that we need to clear that snow. It's not acceptable anymore to not have access to the buttons. But again, with this app, or the fact you can wave, does add a little bit of improvement. So because maybe you can just get, you know, closer to it without actually having to press the button. This is the second type of crossing on the overhead flashing beacons. They're what they refer to as RA5s. RA5 actually is the sign, the black and white sign here, but most people refer to these overhead as RA5s. In this particular instance, this was the second installation of RFBs. We actually installed it at a location that had the RA5. So kind of in one way a waste, but a new apartment building was built right here and the site distance was bad. So we installed, you know, both one existed. So we installed the RFBs. During Hurricane Juan, all of these power poles came down. This was a total mess, this whole area. Abercrombie Road, which is one of our main roads, lost an awful lot of power poles. It looked like a disaster, like a bomb went off. Most of the utility poles were owned by Alliant. And so therefore, as Nova Scotia Power came and the crews came to replace utility poles, nobody was touching these. So this was this street was blocked for many, many days. So that's a whole different story. But so we never replaced the overhead RA5s. And I have had questions from folks in this apartment building saying, like, we lowered the level of safety here, but in reality, you only need one of them. So we're not replacing. They offer both the same level of protection under the active crossing. So we're not installing the overheads because that's not what we've been putting up. We've been going with the RFBs. This is another overhead. This is a picture of HRM, and I'm not quite sure where this is, but this kind of represents then the overhead. So there's pedestrian buttons that you would press. I think the next slide, we're going to talk about signage. So if you look at this crossing, this has to be in a school zone. I could continually see wrong signage. And here's so for crosswalks, there's really, I got 4 here, but I'm going to go back one. There is this one up above, which is we say walking person. It's black with a white person, whereas the sign for crosswalk is a black person on a white background. So if you see, so here's the regular crosswalk. That's the only sign in the TAC manual. Here's the one in the school zone. It's two people, or like, I guess representing maybe children, or there's an advance warning sign if that's in advance of a crosswalk, if it's needed, say sight distances aren't good. And then here's your school zone that are posted to indicate or delineate a school zone. So we continually see wrong signs. You'll see this sign with the two children just used anywhere, like that's all that staff had, so they put it up, but it's wrong. It's meant for a school zone. And if you see these greenish signs on the rectangular sign, yes, it might look better or bright, but it's wrong. So you see a little bit of everything in different municipalities. So, but there's really only two crosswalk signs. One, both rectangular, one is this top one, and one is for the school zone. So consistency is important because we should all be doing the same thing across Canada. I'm going to talk a tiny bit about traffic signals, and there's two types. I know maybe most folks on the call today don't have traffic signals, so I won't spend a whole lot of time. Just a quick shot from the TAC manual that there's all kinds of information in the TAC manual about traffic signals. So we have pedestrian signals and then full signals. The pedestrian signal, I'll show it on the next page, is we install one of these. I'm only aware of two in the province. So when you're coming over the McDonald Bridge and you're heading to Dartmouth and the Sportsplex is on the right, you'll see the same kind of signal. It's a set of signals. It's activated by the pedestrian. If there were no pedestrians there, that will stay green forever. So this is the highest level of treatment. So it's fully controlled. So if a pedestrian touches or presses the button, you come to the vehicle movements are controlled. So the cars or vehicles will come to a complete stop like any other full intersection, as opposed to the RRFBs, which is just a warning light. So I'm not aware of another, or maybe HRM has two. I don't know if there's any other of these installations in Nova Scotia. Why we installed it, it's East River Road, which is a 4-lane, it's actually a 5-lane street. And on this side is a trail, and it connects to a trail on the other side. There was no possible way for pedestrians to safely cross at that point. We expected them, if you're a trail user and you're coming along, then we wanted you to go down the road to a controlled intersection, cross, and then come back. So that wasn't happening. People were taking chances running across. The other thing, because of the 5 lanes, there's an area of refuge here. So that a pedestrian can, take a break. You could press, if you were too slow, you could at least be safe and rest there, and it offers a level of protection. So this is a really specialized type of crossing. Expensive. I forget what this cost, but I think it was over 100,000. So a municipality, it's not just that easy to say, oh, we want 2 more of those. Or in New Glasgow, I could see another place where one of these would be warranted. We got a lot of objection to this when we installed it, whether it was Facebook or we have a thing called here, which I'm not signed up to. It's called the Pictou County Rant and Rave. Just a negative place to go, but the critics complained about the waste of money and another set of lights and a lot of misinformation. But this provides a very safe crossing for all users, whether all of these crossings aren't just related to disabled persons. You'll notice the tactile plates, the buttons that you can wave. So we're trying to make sure every new install is done to the best technology. Speaking of old technology, so just quickly on traffic signals, the first versions were on timers. So if it could be 2 a.m. and you're coming along and you still have to, you'd still have to wait for the intersection to go through its time cycle. A lot of those don't have PED buttons. All you did as a pedestrian, you just wait for the other street to get the go, and then you walked. You may or may not have pedestrian signals. Nobody is installing those anymore. The second kind of iteration of those were pavement detection, vehicle detection in the loops in the pavement. And they may or may not have pedestrian buttons. But I'll hear still nowadays from folks, could we adjust the timing on something? But we don't even have that anymore. What we do have is Wavetronic smart sensors. So the purpose of those is to pick up movements of the vehicle. So when a vehicle comes, then this instrument then knows there's vehicles, and that's how the signals work. But what it doesn't do, and one of the reasons is we want vehicles to be moving quickly, everything from anti-idling. There's no point of a vehicle sitting at an intersection with nobody else around waiting, a minute to go. So what it's led to, though, and this is what education is important, pedestrians must activate the signals, because you could stand at one of these intersections as a pedestrian, the light changes, but the PEDs and the countdown PEDs aren't activated because nobody pressed the button. So as users get more and more familiar with these, they'll get to know that. But initially we had some of these installs and people thought the pedestrian signals weren't working properly because the walking person in the pedestrian signal never came up. You have to press the button. I wonder how my time is. Okay, Julie? Okay, I'll keep going.
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, curb ramps. A little bit of discussion on curb ramps, curb cuts, ramps and Twizzys. Go to the next one. We're not going to try to dissect this, but this is one of our standard drawings, and it's really about driveways. But a driveway is very similar to a curb ramp. With in this case, you'd have the tactile plates. But what I want to highlight is this particular sidewalk is along the street. So the sidewalk abuts the curb, and then this could be an intersecting walkway or pathway. What we have to do is install these correctly, and I'm still seeing them not done. As you come along here, I'm hoping people can see my little red beacon here. As you come, this has to drop down. I still see a lot of places where either this goes through at the same elevation, and then they try to just ramp a little bit of this concrete down. So there is a proper way to do this, and it's it's shown in B651. But construction at the time is so important to do it right. This is even a better example. This is where they show a median. So I see a lot of municipalities run the sidewalk straight through, and if this sidewalk is, say, 16 inches higher than the road surface, then this little ramp, all they do is they place that later and make a steep ramp. So if it's a driveway, then cars are bottoming out, or if it's pedestrians, then it's too steep and it's not constructed. So as you're coming along here, you have to drop the sidewalk, and the front has to be dropped more than the back because you want the drainage coming out to the street. So important. You would think all contractors should know how to do that, or all staff should know how to do that, but they're not always done. And once the concrete's all placed, it is really hard to then say, oh, our own crew, we got to go back and remove that. That usually doesn't happen, and you're just left with something that you're disappointed in. A little bit on Twizzys. I hope all folks know what a tactile warning surface indicator is. Again, we were one of the first in the province. At the same time, I happened to be in Bridgewater, and I saw Bridgewater had some red Twizzys in. We first installed the yellow plastic plates. I had a salesperson in here. That was the first time even learning about these. I saw them in North Conway years ago, and at the end of a sidewalk, I actually thought they were probably to help stop you from slipping or something. I didn't even know what they were for. So after learning about it, we had a salesperson in. Yellow is supposedly the last color you see if you were losing your vision. So we purchased them, plastic plates. You can also buy a glue down version. But we learned a lot from that first install. The plastic truncated dome sheared off the first year by the sidewalk machines. And then I'll show you the installation here. It was here's a picture on the right of what it looks like now. Yes, it would still offer a little bit of a person with a cane, but all the domes are sheared off. So we're not going with plastic anymore. I do like the fact they're yellow, but we're going with the cast iron ones. And again, from a color contrast, um, I was on the committee that helped develop the built environment. We were very adamant about color contrast, but the Twizzies now, the cast iron, when they're put in new concrete, they do offer probably the 70% color contrast, which is the patina, the rusted color of the Twizzy, and the nice white concrete. As concrete ages, it gets darker, but there's no easy way. You can't start, first of all, even if you could put a coating on it, there's not enough staff to do that. That would really never happen. Then that would change. They could be slippery. So we may at some point not see the color contrast as these sidewalks age. So this was our first install. What we did here, talking about learning lessons, we changed this whole intersection and made our curves a bigger radius. And this was before considering pedestrian safety. We wanted to do that for the trucks. It just made it easier for the plow trucks. So we were making our curves bigger. The approach nowadays is to make your curves smaller because you're shortening the distance crossing the crosswalk. So it has to be a balance. But again, there's where education comes in. When we did this intersection, we weren't really thinking. We were only thinking about trucks or turning trucks and vehicles. We weren't thinking about pedestrians. We were in the fact that we wanted to use these, our first installation of the Twizzies. The other problem with this intersection, we would work, our own crew did it. So we worked on this particular intersection, cast these into the concrete, lined them up as best we could, but we were lining them up with the old corner that then got redone when we went to the other corner. And then at the end of the day, when this work was all done, nothing lined up properly. So it was a learning experience. The other thing is when I first was introduced to Twizzies, I understood that the Twizzy must be in direction of the crosswalk because I thought that was part of a person using a cane that they could kind of tell where the direction is so that they wouldn't walk out into the middle of the intersection. But in speaking with CNIB, and you'll see from other photos, that's not necessarily the case, that a person with a visual impairment, and there's people that could correct me today, have to use other clues to use. It's not just the Twizzy that indicates direction. I wish we could get to a point where that was the case. So here's some installs that were more recent. Even in this one, if I went perpendicular out from there, if you were using these as a directional item, you would walk out into the middle of the intersection. Here, this one is not so bad. In all of these photographs that were taken this week, you'll notice that there's no pavement markings. Everybody has to paint every year. We do all our own painting, but it's a challenge. By the time the winter comes, most of these pavement markings are off. Here's one we did at a railway crossing, and we also have this torched on emblem that was provided by the railway, to the look, listen, live strategy that they have. Again, here's another one. So every one of these installs, we're learning a little more. And again, they're certainly not as easy to install. And I don't mean they're certainly not as easy to align as it does look on a piece of paper with it drawn. So here's some lessons learned. Here's one. This is a recent job. We have a manhole right in the intersection. So this is where they chose to put the Twizzies. That doesn't really, I could see lots wrong with that. If a person that knows with a visual impairment is going to think that the street starts there. This middle picture was disappointing. This was a sidewalk we were doing a few years ago. All the other Twizzies went in, more correctly, and then these two, they decided to put them this way. And you land on site and you're going, holy frig, what's this? But so we're certainly not, we're learning, and that is, you know, but I'm not going to probably go back now and have all that jackhammered out. So is it slightly, you know, when we took the Rick Hansen course, we realized that you can't solve every problem, but if even getting closer is better than nothing. I don't know if this particular instance, if that's is something that we can say, okay, at least it's better than nothing, but they're not installed correctly. Okay, parking. We're still learning on parking. This was done a few years ago, so it probably doesn't meet the new CSA 65123, but we did a couple of things here. These were new spaces we created. We actually installed the accessible meter, or the meter, lower than we normally would. We did provide the lanes on the side. Yeah, so I'm going to be honest, and I thought I had a picture during the storm, which I was away on vacation. We had a complaint, and it's went into the accessibility directorate. Snow was piled, and we have massive amount of snow, and this is in front of our library and fire station that had to be, it's a very wide street. So this particular green space area, I'll call it, there was a big pile of snow piled on it. When I got back and heard about the complaint, I did go down, and yes, the snow encroached into this space, let's say 2 feet, but basically rendering that space useless. Yes, you could get a car. If you're an able-bodied person, you could get a vehicle in there and park and go into the library. But for a person that needs that space, it wasn't usable. This one was open, and we did receive a complaint about it. So I've responded back to the accessibility director, and we do have to do better. I'm not going to try to make excuses, but there was a tremendous amount of snow, and yeah, and I understand, like, definitely understand the argument. If me as an able-bodied person, if there was a space that has snow in it, I have many more choices to find. We have very limited parking spaces, accessible parking spaces downtown, and we just have to do better. So back to the education, our staff have to know that you just can't, you gotta keep these accessible spaces at a higher level of service than the other ones, because we just have to. Back to where we're not perfect. These are 2 spaces in our downtown. We redid our downtown sidewalks in 2010. My predecessor I had just joined New Glasgow. Big upgrade to downtown. Yes, we got a couple of spaces downtown, a nice torched on symbol and a proper sign. But guess what? We don't have a curb ramp. So you're expected to kind of get out in the travel lane and then roll down either to the intersection. So we definitely have to like repair or replace these. This particular project was stamped concrete at the bump outs, and you'll see regular concrete. The stamped concrete looks great, not ideal for a person using a cane. It's the depressions in the stamped concrete aren't as prominent as they were, probably from plowing and everything. But initially, when this work was done, it looked beautiful. It was a lot more brighter than it is now. But guess what? We weren't thinking about accessibility at the time. That really presented a barrier to folks. And we had lots of complaints, even though it looked great. But looking great doesn't solve removing the barrier. A couple of good things. So it didn't go in yet, but the community development, that's our like recreation folks. They purchased an accessible kayak launch. So I'll show you a picture of that. So it was purchased last year, but it got too close to the end of the season for them to install it. But this is kind of what it's going to look like. This is just off the website of the folks that sold it. So that's a nice project. So we're going to be proud of that. It will go along this wharf here. But what we have to do is somebody, probably myself or working with community development, look at the pathway to this. Is everything else accessible? Great to have an accessible kayak launch on the end of a wharf. But if, you know, if you look at this ramp from this photo, this is just off the web. the ramp comes down almost to the end of the wharf. So I don't know if that's what it looks like now, but it's no good again just to put something in without looking at what the impacts of the whole area. Temporary sidewalks. So we have two kinds. We have the outdoor cafes. New Glasgow does have a bylaw, and we basically copied HRM. So it's almost identical to, but that was back, I don't have the year on this. And it was mainly just, to allow the temporary sidewalk and safety and car protection going around. There are some certainly components there for accessibility, ramps and that, but we really should be looking at all of these bylaws again with an accessibility lens on it. Then we get into construction, and then we follow the temporary workplace traffic control manual. I happen to sit on that committee that helps develop the manual. So they're getting better. So this is hot off. This is not even published yet. So this discussion was brought forward from HRM, but we in order to have safe pedestrian passage, there's two types on sidewalks. So we're talking about sidewalk. There's two types of sidewalk signs. There's one that says sidewalk closed ahead. That's usually placed at an intersection. The purpose of that is to give the user, the ability to make the decision and cross, but allow businesses to be open. We get all kinds of complaints if we close a sidewalk and, the activity, the trench or whatever is 50 meters down. Well, the businesses up close to the intersection are going, you're affecting my business, and we get complaints. So what the new manual says, you have a sidewalk closed ahead, and then at say the trench or wherever the work is being, then you have the sidewalk closed. The problem with that is they're always on barricades, and a person with a visual impairment or using a cane, it's not cane detectable. So the first thing you know, they're falling over the barricade. So this is instead of coming up with a different type of barricade, this was the solution to put cones. So the new part to this is the cones. So they were never there before, even though we used to put cones. But this still doesn't solve the problem, because the width of this barricade is 8 feet. Now you can make them a little bit shorter, but most of our sidewalks, God, we're lucky if we have 5 feet. So if this was the one with the sign sidewalk closed ahead, here would be, say, the building. On this side, you still allow pedestrians to get by. Well, that should be another 3 feet. So 8 plus 3, we don't have 11-foot sidewalks. So this thing is going to still impede the getting around it. So, it's still a challenge. So again, maybe we'll come up with something better, but this is going to be in the new traffic control manual that'll be released like in April. So, but the other thing is, if, a visual impaired person will know to go around it, but when they get down to the second one, we don't want them going around. So I think there has to be two different assemblies here, one for the sidewalk closed and one for the sidewalk closed ahead. I will say, like, and I was on vacation when this one went through, so maybe I'm not understanding something that happened in the discussion, but this is why I'm showing this, is that they are working to try to improve accessibility, and this was the solution for the cane detectable, just by adding cones. Transit stops. New Glasgow now is one of we have some transit. We never had transit. I went out and took these pictures and said, oh my gracious. So this is on Westfall Road, which was one of our busiest. There's the Honda dealership and superstores there. This is what I'm looking at. So that's all full of mud and crap. And then if you back up a little bit, there's the condition of the sidewalk. So certainly not something we're proud of, but I'm showing it to say, we have to do better as well. Quickly on a community garden, they relocated it from one site to this site last year. Yes, it has some raised beds. The surface is relatively flat. There's nice spaces between, but this is more like a Class A gravel. Would you consider this accessible or not? I don't know. This picture here on the right, there needs to be a sidewalk come through there. I'm actually going to have them, believe it or not, remove these posts and push it in to get a better sidewalk there. So an attempt to make an accessible, they're not labeling it accessible community garden, but we shouldn't have to label. I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but we shouldn't have to call washrooms accessible. We shouldn't have to say it's an accessible community garden. We just install one and make it accessible. That's, you know, we don't need to label everything accessible. Just do the bloody thing right, and then everybody can use it. We were proud of our bottle filling station. When I was out taking some photos this week, I said, I'm going to run over and see what it looks like. It's actually more level than it looks here, but there's where, you know, the sidewalk machine came through on the trail. It's right on a trail, and it is designed for winter operation. So that thing can still work in the winter without freezing. But right now there's snow, but there's nobody assigned or would have ever thought to go shovel and make this thing accessible. We just wait for the snow to melt. I only have a few more, Julie, so a nice project that we improved. This was a ramp. Would have been a former street, but this was a very steep ramp. The picture doesn't do it justification. There's no way somebody in a wheelchair could ever go up it. It usually has gravel on it, and in freezing rain, you could just see somebody coming down there and slipping and whacking their head. So what we've done is eliminated that, and we built across the top. Here it is here in this picture. This was just completed by like November, a new level sidewalk, and then it comes down on a gentle curve. Here's our farmers market. We have a proper crossing RFBs there. So this is a project that we're proud of to eliminate this barrier. Very expensive project because the railway is involved. We paid $2,000 a day for whether the person was there for an hour or all day, just to sit in their own private vehicle and watch us work. So that added probably, plus some work they did, to $40,000 to that job. This is just a picture of our town hall. Our trees died on Main Street. Urban trees don't do well if they're not installed properly. We've gone to these planters with burning bushes. Looks nice. There is lots of space here. It could be considered like under clearing your path, that it's in the way, but there is space. But we take these in the winter, and here's what we're left with. So that looks like a trip hazard to me, and I don't know what the answer is there. So there's the grates from the trees, which are under the planters, but not ideal. It presents a barrier. When they did the downtown, they did the bump outs, which is it shortens the crossing, and we do the zebra crosswalks. I didn't really talk about zebras, but we do them anywhere. We do them in our downtown. You have to do them in school zones, and we do them on anywhere where there's a mid crosswalk. We have a new EV charger. I didn't get involved in this one, and maybe I should have. It's on a gravel. There is distance there, but is this truly accessible? Questionable. We're doing better on benches. The old days, we used to put a bench on a trail, that make a little concrete pad, probably, just the width of the bench. And you'd set it 6 feet off the trail. There'd be grass between the trail and the bench. Now we're improving space and made a connection on this one. They just installed community development, I think an accessible picnic table is going on that, but at least it has access. It's big enough, for wheelchair users or anybody to use. And yeah, and here's one that was installed, an accessible picnic table a couple of years ago. They put it on an existing pad, but there was grass in front of it. So last year they made it more accessible. So again, we're trying to do things better. I'll end with just some shots from Costa Rica if we got time. And they try, but we're so, oh God. So here's a typical crosswalk. This is in the town of Jaco. This isn't bad except for the guy wires that come down right in the middle of the sidewalk. So you're walking along and whack, you hit that. I have a funny story where I fell over something that I had seen on one way, and coming back, I just about killed myself, right? Something. Here's one of their ramps, which is and painted yellow. But if you were walking along here and you weren't paying attention, you kind of fall off, like the ramp didn't go the full width. Here's a ramp going into a business. Now, I didn't have my level with me, so I didn't check the grade, but a little bit steep. All kinds of things just in the middle of the sidewalk. Here's an attempt at like a tactile. Why it's just on that section, I don't know, but it. Here's another ramp going down with like kind of everything seemed dangerous. If you really had to watch your footing. Here's a ramp going into a building. I don't know where you're supposed to go to get to the side of it to open the door. I think that opened out, but somebody thought that was true. Here's an EV charging station, a modern charging station, and this place on the street, but you would have to walk up the stairs to use the charger. Here's another one just of a ramp. And that's it. Yeah, I kind of blew through that, but my point is you got to have a budget. You have to look after what you do have. Again, we build things and 5 or 6 years later, things are falling apart and you have to have a maintenance plan. You need policies and you need bylaws to support it. But the biggest thing, education, accessibility is not just a community development or a recreation thing. It's everybody. And if we can embed that, all our decisions that we make every day is like, I use the comparison to safety, that it's just one of the conditions when we're thinking of something. And my final point is we should we shouldn't have to make an accessible playground. The next playground should just be accessible. So, and again, the Glasgow's got a way to go. I'm proud of our plan. Has a lot of good stuff in there, but it's like molasses moving this to where I want to be. But we need to do audits. We need to get, we can't depend on funding either. That's another point. Just thinking of this. You can't just say, oh, I can only do an accessibility improvement if I get funding under the one of the either the federal or the provincial program. It's no different than asset management. You can't just replace your water pipes only when you get money from the feds. You gotta, but I know there's challenges. Communities are struggling. Some are growing, some aren't. So it's a complicated issue. And you got to balance that with all the other services, police services, fire protection, public works infrastructure. So it is I don't envy councillors at budget time that have to take all of these requests, whether it's from outside agencies, and try to come up with a balanced budget. So anyway, that's it.
Wow, thank you so much, Earl. That was certainly a lot of information, and I have a pile of notes and questions, but we only have a few minutes, so I'm going to open up to the floor to see if anybody has any burning questions or comments for Earl. One of the things, I guess, just to as you were presenting, like, the whole piece around the Twizzies. So this salesperson comes, they've got the yellow Twizzies, they seem like a really great idea, and then they get all sheared off. So then there's this whole thing too about like innovation and product development, and like what really are the best products out there. It really seems like trial and error, and unfortunately you end up spending money and then have to experience the error and the downfalls yourself. So that's really problematic when it comes to budgeting and justifying spending money on things as well. And the other thing that I learned from this presentation was how difficult it is to install the Twizzies to ensure that people can find the direction, the proper direction to cross the road, because often the way that the Twizzys are, because they don't seem to be like, they haven't made them so that they're flexible and curved, sending you to the right direction. So
You
that's really complicated.
you can buy curved, and that's another thing. So there's different angles. But does the municipality have the right curves in stock when they go to do the pour that day? They're running back to the shop to grab the Twizzies. You kind of grab what's there in stock. So that requires then planning. The other thing is they work a lot better when there's a median. And most of the drawings you'll see in the sketches in the CSA code, they look nice when there's a median. In New Glasgow, we were getting rid of medians, and now we're not so sure because medians offer space for trees and better health of trees, a better sense of security and safety for the user on the sidewalk if there's a piece of grass between you and the street. But having said that, a lot of them, like leaving a small median, is no good because that's usually not maintained and it's just doesn't look good. We've kind of gone to I was going to mention that we've gone a lot of ours is abut the curb, but on those we're trying to now make them a lot wider than the traditional 5 feet. So the other thing is a lot of the older municipalities, HRM, New Glasgow, look at everywhere, there's not that much right of way. So we have limited space. If you were planning a new subdivision or something, it's yes, great. But in a downtown core or in Halifax, there's not that much real estate to put in a sidewalk and a median. So yeah.
I'm just gonna say there's a countdown happening in my timer, so I don't know if that kicks us off. If it kicks us off, I'm gonna say, oh, is it kicking us off? No, apparently not. If it kicks us off, I apologize, but you'll see in the built environment, we have an opportunity to continue this discussion. So I will actually, when I send the link for the video recording of today, I'll start the forum discussion so we can pick up and still have this conversation with Earl. And I'll also send an invite to Maddie too. So Maddie is in that built environment forum. Barb has her hand up.
Thanks. Town of Wolfville, we are jumping into a fairly significant active transportation project. And it seems unclear if these standards have been developed for active transportation. So Earl, I don't know if you know if they have or they haven't, and where I should be asking our project managers and engineers to be looking for those. Or Maddie, that might be a question for you.
Yeah, I can follow up with you. We are expecting to enact the outdoor spaces portion of the built environment standard in the coming months.
Maddie, I will reach out to you because I might be pulling you in on this project. We just want to ensure that this is done as Earl has done right the first time. So that's really where my focus is. Thank you.
And I think the TAC, Transportation Association of Canada, now has lots of good literature on bikeways, and I believe so. I mean, I don't have it here with me, but a lot of work has been done on that. I mean, now we even have signals that look like traffic signals that are just for bikes.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah, what was
some great examples in the news of what not to do, particularly blind or low vision pedestrians and intersecting with bike lanes and sidewalks. So I can send you some stuff for sure.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was a really interesting piece. Like it's great to hear this from your perspective, Earl, because often just, as a pedestrian, you can be in the space and you can see all the things that are wrong. But from your perspective, you have to take into consideration people who use vehicles as well as the pedestrians in relation to the accessibility. So it's it's an entirely different kind of lens that you have to come at this with. And I really appreciate you sharing that with us today. It just sort of demonstrates how complex it is, how much there is to learn. you know, and that whole piece around safety, like safety really equates to accessibility in these conversations. And I was hoping, Maddie, too, like some of the questions that came up for me were the pieces that Earl highlighted around the pedestrian bridge that went under the rail bridge. And he talked about, you know, footing for that. And, you know, like what, like, well, are there standards, are there guidelines for footing on those types of bridge walkways? And then also, you know, the discussion about the bridge handrail versus a guard as well, and those types of things. So yeah, those are really interesting pieces.
Yeah,
One,
Earl, I'd love to stay connected with what you do on the bridge, the pedestrian pathway under the bridge. I believe you right now you have metal grating like a catwalk style, right?
right. And the reason that was put there is A, for winter maintenance too, like the
Yeah.
benefit of it, it doesn't collect rain or snow that much. I don't know what that looked like after this particular snow, but in general, we don't send a machine over that pedway. But again, difficult to walk on, especially with the puppies.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, I think it's an example of where there's not a clear answer. If we were designing it new, maybe we would do it differently. But as Earl said, you know, there's multiple goals here. We want, you know, you don't want water buildup. You don't want you know, canes slipping through the holes, dogs. So yeah, I'm interested to see what you guys do in New Glasgow, Earl. I've walked that before. I'm from Pictou County myself. So yeah, I'll stay tuned to what you're doing on that bridge in New Glasgow.
I'll just mention also that it has to be something that's easy, like you know, I don't know if I want something that come November that then we have to have staff and do a big exercise of removing whatever we put down and then put it back down in the spring. Like, you know, everybody has limited staff and limited money, so
Mhm.
I don't know.
Mhm. And you know, and just the piece around the snow clearing, right? Like we live on the east coast of Canada. We have more snow than we want half the time. And you know, it's continual, right? So there's, you know, the highlighting the importance of snow clearing, and you know, even though you've gone to machines, there's still a need for, you know, hand snow clearing around some of the indicators and access routes. So that's a, you know, that's a really important piece. Otherwise, yeah, people get on the horn, right? Because their access has been blocked, and even though everybody tries their best and people are working around the clock to make things happen, you know, these things do happen. These are the elements that we're contending with. So it's a very, I'm hearing your perspective loudly and clearly today, and I really appreciate that, Earl. Anybody else have any burning questions or comments?
I just wanted to really quickly say, Earl, there are those pedestrian controlled signals. There's one on Quinpool Road and there's one on Main Street in Dartmouth as well.
Oh, okay.
So we have some other comments here. Earl, Katie said, thanks so much. Very informative and interesting presentation. It was great to see the real world examples. And I totally agree, being able to see, you know, the stuff that you're super proud of and the stuff that you can still see that there are, you know, there are issues with. That was really great. Maggie McDonald said, thank you. She loved the presentation. Same with Matt Mahoney. Thanks for the presentation. And Rachel Gilbert as well. She learned a lot. So yeah, it was really great to have you. I really appreciate the time you took to prepare this presentation and share with us. Thank you.
I wish I were back in Costa Rica.
I know that ramp, the purple ramp with like markings in it to make sure nobody was going to slip. Wow. Thank you, Maddie, for joining us as well. Really great to have you here. And yeah, and anytime, love to always have you and have your expertise and insight as well into this work.
Amazing work, Earl.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, folks. So yes, yeah. Look like thanks, Barb. So yeah, watch for your inboxes on Monday. Lots of stuff coming up, and the next community practice again in March, in April with Melissa Myers on town halls, and then from conversation that I had earlier today with Barb Shaw about engagement, Barb is going to lead the May community of practice with a presentation on citizen engagement. So super excited about that. Thanks, Barb, for sharing your expertise with us. So lots of expertise in this community of practice, and thanks to the newcomers for coming today. Really great to have you, and looking forward to working with you as we go forward. Have a wonderful soggy day, folks.
All right. Thanks, folks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.